Let me ask you a question. When was the last time you said, I'm so stressed out? Or when was the last time the words, I am burned out, came out of your mouth? Or when's the last time you woke up in the morning and thought, I don't want to go to work today? Those could all be signs that you're about to hit the wall in your life. Let me ask you another question. When was the last time you played? When was the last time you allowed yourself some free, unabashed, guilt-free opportunity to rest, unwind, and just play? Well, if that's you, you've said those words, I'm burned out, and you haven't said, I think I'll play today. This episode of the One Simple Thing podcast is for you. Welcome to the show. Dave Kirby here with you, and over the last several episodes of this program, we've been talking to Charlie Hoehn. His book is called Play It Away, A Workaholic's Cure for Anxiety. We have a banner ad on the website if you'd like to pick up a copy of his book, because it is just an awesome kind of how-to for how to get yourself out of that state of burnout and back into a place where you feel like you've got some space, you've got some margin in your life. And Charlie's cure? Play. What does that look like? What does that mean? Does that mean we quit our jobs and go out and hang out on the playground all day? No, not exactly. You will find out as you read his book. So again, there's a banner ad on our website. Click on it, and it will take you to Charlie's Amazon page. Again, the book is called Play It Away, A Workaholic's Cure for Anxiety. Today, I just thought I'd share some of my thoughts about what Charlie and I talked about over the last several episodes of the program. And, it started out early in the week with Charlie just talking about his story. And he had a very successful career going on. He was working with people the likes of Tim Ferriss. He helped him launch the 4-Hour Work Week. He worked with Ramit Sethi on launching of his New York Times bestseller, I Will Teach You to Be Rich. And from the outside looking in, Charlie's life was good, but he found himself so overworked and that and burned out. He started having panic attacks. He started having anxiety attacks. And he said, something's got to change. So he took a step back from it all, started rethinking and reevaluating his life. And what he discovered, the missing element in his life, play. You think about it, kids. Now, I understand they don't have the responsibility that adults do. They don't have the weight of the world on their shoulders. But you don't see too many stressed out kids. Why? Well, they play. They interact with each other, right? They're out in the yard or on the playground or whatever. They're interacting and having fun with other human beings. They're not slaving away all day by themselves. They don't feel the sense of isolation, not having human contact, right? They've got their parents that love on them. That's important for all of us. And if we would all begin to think about reintroducing those sorts of concepts back into our lives, it might make all the difference in the world. I know for me, I'm an entrepreneur. I've been probably 20 years self-employed now, something like that. And I know I've done the same thing. In fact, there's a time in my life when I prided myself on how many hours I could work. Now, early in my career, I went with my wife to a dinner party. She was an executive assistant for a very successful woman in Sarasota, Florida. And her husband was the guy who invented a very popular line of radar detectors. Fox, is that the name of them? The Fox radar detectors, I think. Anyway, he was the guy who developed that. He sold the company on for, a few $100 million or whatever. And he and I were talking one night at this party, and just out of the blue, he says to me, so how many hours a day do you work? And I said, 8, I guess. And he said, you know what? If you work 8 hours a day, you'll always be working for somebody else. You work 12 hours a day or more, and you'll end up working for yourself. So I set that as my life's goal. And I took pride. 12 hours? That was my average day from that point on. 15 hours, sometimes 18 and 20 hours. Yeah, I felt really good about that. But I got to tell you, eventually I hit the wall myself. Started having headaches. Had a lot of dropout in my personal relationships. Had several things go wrong. Made some bad decisions. And I think I could trace it all back to that kind of that arrogance of feeling like I could work harder than everybody else. It's just not sustainable over the long term. And so that's why I love talking to Charlie Hoehn this week on the program, because I felt like he gave us and introduced to us some concepts that most of us probably haven't thought of. He talks about us having this thing, kind of a life is serious mentality. Like, there are too many important things I have to do to stop and play. Really? So life is so important that you don't have the time to stop and recharge your battery? that you don't have the time to stop and allow yourself to rest and rejuvenate and regenerate, that's a disaster waiting to happen. If life is important, then you don't have the time not to play and to rest and to allow yourself to recharge. We fall into this trap, the rest paradox, I'd like to call it. And here's the rest paradox. You think to yourself, well, when I'm resting, my productivity is zero, right? I'm not working, so my productivity is zero. So we tend to think rest equals no productivity. But here's the paradox. When you take time to rest, then you come back to your work, your productivity skyrockets. You get far more done with the rest than you ever would have done without the rest. I remember hearing a story, a very successful pastor, I think he was talking, and he gave the metaphor of a tank, like a water tank. And at the top of the water tank is a fill valve, like a faucet, all right? The bottom is a hole. It's a drain valve. And every day we get up and go to work or get about our business, the drain turns on, right? And it starts draining the water out of that tank. The water represents your level of passion, your level of energy, your level of happiness, whatever you want to call it. And every day when we get up to go to work, the drain turns on and it starts draining it out of us. Well, there's two ways that you could keep that bucket full. Number one is to turn off the drain. It's not really realistic. It's not going to happen. The other way is to turn on the fill valve and to make sure that the fill valve is going at a faster pace, or at least as fast a pace as the drain valve. So as you get into really stressful work, that drain valve's going to open even more. And the only way to combat that is to amp up. And that's what this pastor was talking about. He said, what I learned through hitting the wall myself, he did. He hit the wall and he had to quit his church. He had to learn how to basically relive his life and rethink the way he was living his life. He said, what I learned is the more stress that comes into my life, the first temptation is to throw my rest and my play out. He said, but that's when I realized I've got to amp it up even more, because that drain valve has been turned on full blast. I got to turn on the fill valve. I got to spend more time with my family. I've got to spend more time playing. I got to get on the jet skis and go out and have some fun, even more now than I did before. And that's an interesting way for us to think about it, right? The rest paradox. You can get more done with rest. Even though your productivity is zero during that rest time, you're more productive with rest than you are without rest. Earlier, I asked some people on Facebook to share their thoughts with me about this idea of allowing ourselves to have guilt-free rest. Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever started to rest or take a day off and the whole time you feel guilty because you know there are things you got to be doing? Is that really sustainable? And my friend George, who works at a big media company out in California, he said, what I learned was boundaries. I learned that I had to say, all right, I leave work at this time and work is done. And this time is for my family, and I don't mix the two, that I draw boundaries around the specific areas of my life. And he had to give himself permission to do that. So it really is key for us to find that ability, that strength, to give ourselves permission to walk away from our work and to find the rest that we're looking for. So how do you know if you're burned out? Well, there are some telltale signs. If you start dreading getting up in the morning and going to work, you're probably burned out. How else? Well, if you start losing your creativity. I know what I do is highly creative work. And I know when I start to hit creative block, I realize that I'm burned out, I'm overstressed, I need to take some time off. And when I do, just like my productivity, my creativity comes back even better with the rest than it would have been without the rest. I'll give you another key. Have you ever fantasized about just disappearing? Just getting in your car and driving away and never coming back? If you have, that's probably a telltale sign that you are burned out, that you are stressed out. When you start fantasizing about escaping, you feel like you want to crawl in a hole somewhere, you want to go to another country where nobody knows you, that's a telltale sign that you are stressed out. I remember a successful executive lived in California. I heard him talking one time, and he said, he lived in San Diego, I believe, and he said, when I start having fantasies about getting on my boat and just sailing down the Mexican coast and never coming back, he said, that's a red flag for me that I'm burned out and that I need to take some time off and I need to readjust my priorities. I need to spend time with people that are important to me. I need to play and I need to rest. So if you've ever fantasized about just disappearing one day, that is probably a telltale sign that you are burned out. So what do we do about it? Well, Charlie Hoehn on the episode 283 of our program, One Simple Thing podcast, talked about something he calls anchors. And you think about anchors, what's an anchor do? Well, it holds a boat in place, right? Doesn't let it move. And anchors are kind of the same way in our lives. They are people or situations that we get involved with in our lives that hold us in one spot. They don't let us move forward. They don't let us find the peace that we're looking for. So what kind of things are anchors? I'll just mention a couple of them that Charlie mentions in his book, and he goes into more detail. So again, click on that banner ad on our website and get your copy of Charlie's book, Play It Away. But one of them is the news. Think about it now. If you watch the news all day long, what's your attitude like? It probably inspires fear, maybe anger, frustration, all these negative emotions that are inspired because we're watching the news. And they don't show nearly enough good news, right? They don't tell you about the 5,000 houses around your neighborhood that didn't get broken into last night. They tell you about the one that did. So all of a sudden now I'm afraid that my house is going to get broken into. They don't tell you about all the planes in the world that didn't crash yesterday. They tell you about the one that did. So now all of a sudden I'm stressed out about my travel. You get the idea. They focus on the negative. And you just cannot maintain a positive attitude when you're focusing on the negative. And watching the news is definitely one of those anchors that'll do it for you. How about, Charlie calls them vampires. They are people. You hang around with vampires. Vampires are people that will suck the life out of you, right? They're either overly negative or they're overly fearful, or they have a pessimistic attitude, or they're constantly telling you you can't do it, or why even bother, or those kinds of ideas. Or maybe they're always just stressed out themselves, and that stress just has a way of rubbing off on you. That's no way to live your life. So if we're going to get past that anchor, it might be a matter of maybe having to stay away from those people, or cut our time with those people back severely. Or maybe it just starts with a conversation with that person and saying, listen, dude, ma'am, honey, whatever the case may be, your attitude, I've just noticed, is really negative and it's dragging me down. Maybe they need to have that honest conversation as much as you need to have it with them. So maybe it starts there. Another one of those anchors might be trying to live up to other people's expectations for us. You remember the movie Dead Poets Society? There was the one kid in the class that had really been inspired by Robin Williams' character, his teacher. And he wanted to be an actor, but his dad was having nothing of that. He was going to follow in the family business. I don't know if it was being a lawyer or whatever it was. And the kid became so upset and depressed about feeling like he was never going to be able to follow his own dreams that he took his own life. And maybe that resonates with you. Maybe you got into doing something as a career because somebody else had the expectations. Or maybe you got into doing something as a career because you loved it, but somewhere along the way, you lost your passion for it and you wanted to move on, but other people expect you to keep on doing what you're doing. Well, you are the only one responsible for your own life. And maybe for some reason you do have to work at a career where you just don't like it. But for most of us, yeah, we need to think about, am I living the life of somebody else's expectations, or am I living the life I want to live? And being willing to have the courage, even if it means just starting the process of making a life change. I'm not telling you to go quit your job right now and do something else, but maybe it's just the process of beginning a life change that will begin getting you where you want to go. So our modern lifestyle is really insidious. It's fighting against us every day, right? You think about the amount of things that are on our schedule. You think about the fact that we don't have time for rest and relaxation, that we eat too much food that's not good for us, that we have a real problem with social isolation. Think even in the age of social media, we are pretty much isolated. Our lives, our online lives, are just a superficial facade of what our real lives are all about, what our heart is saying to us, of what we really feel inside, or what things are really going on in us. It's just a superficial facade, right? So we have a lack of connection with others. And our modern lifestyle is working against us. So what can you do about that? Well, Charlie Hoehn on this week's programs had 3 simple suggestions that I want to offer up to you right now. The first suggestion was to play for 20 minutes a day. So what does play look like? Well, his suggestion was to think back to when you were a child or when you were young. What things did you like to do for fun? And then start doing them again. You say, well, I used to jump rope. Well, then jump rope. I was thinking about this myself. I used to play basketball all through high school, but I was a junkie. I loved it. Played on Friday nights, played in the driveway, I should say, all day long, on weekends and at night after dinner or whatever. So guess what? I'm going to grab a basketball, and I'm going to start. There's some courts right near my house. I'm going to start showing up there. I'm going to start shooting baskets around. What did you like to do when you were young? Start doing it again. I guess video games is a possibility, but there's something about that physical activity, I think, that really makes a difference for us. So think in terms of something that gets a little physical activity going too. We were just talking, my boys and I, about getting a cornhole game. I know it sounds silly, but it's fun, right? And you get outside or you get out and start laughing with each other, and there's a sense of connection that takes place as well as a result of that. So commit yourself to playing for 20 minutes a day. Number 2, take a 20-minute nap each day. Most of us don't get enough sleep, and sleep is having a dramatic impact on us, both from a productivity level, from an emotional stability level, from a happiness and enjoyment level in our lives. It's hurting our relationships. The lack of sleep is an epidemic in this country, in the U.S. So what can you do about it? Well, yeah, you could start going to bed earlier. But try this. Just take a 20-minute nap every day. Many cultures around the world, that's just an automatic prescription, right? Siesta time. After lunch sometime, take a 20-minute nap. You don't want to go much longer than that because you'll mess up your sleep cycles, and it can be kind of counterproductive at that point. But set an alarm. There are even apps on the App Store you could get that will time your naps and wake you up appropriately. So take that 20-minute nap every day. Number 3, Charlie calls it feasting. Think about this. Down through the millennia of human history, most cultures have had feasts, right, where they got together and enjoyed meals and had a party and a celebration. And I know we do, we have Super Bowl Sunday and we have 4th of July and we have these different holidays that we take to feast. What about on a more regular basis? What if you, at least once or twice a week, got together with other friends or family, people you love and enjoy, and had a meal together and laugh and connect, talk about things that you enjoy, linger, and just talk over a glass of wine or whatever else? It makes such a difference. In cultures all around the world, the importance of sharing a meal together, if you look at human history, pretty much runs the thread throughout human history, this idea of sharing a meal together, and it's kind of being a sacred thing. So 20 minutes a day of play, 20 minutes a day of a nap, and a couple of times a week, feast with somebody. Get together and share that social connection. And it will cure your isolation and could cure your stress and will probably cure your burnout as well. Would love to know what you think of these ideas. If you have any others you'd like to share, if you have any thoughts on burnout or you have any suggestions for the ways you've overcome burnout, would love to hear about them. You can leave us a comment online at onesimplething.online.com. Also, you can email me, Dave at onesimplethingonline.com with the number 1 in there, Dave at onesimplethingonline.com. Would love to hear your comments as well. Hey, thanks to those of you who have left us a rating and review for the program and subscribed to the show as well. This last week, I noticed that we were as high as number 21 on the iTunes Business, Management, and Marketing chart. That's wonderful. I noticed we've dropped off a little bit over the last couple of days, too. And one of the things that Apple uses to determine those charts is ratings and reviews and the frequency of getting them. It shows that you're really engaged with your audience. So if you listen to this program, you've not left us a rating review, that would be so helpful to us. The higher we go on the charts, it's not just an ego thing. It means more people get exposed to the program. Think about it. Where do you go when you're trying to discover new content? You might go to the most popular episodes or popular shows, right? So the higher we can get, the more chance that people are exposed to the show, and that means us helping to change more lives. So if you want to leave us a rating review, a couple of ways you could do that. Probably the easiest way is on the iTunes on your computer. They make it a little more difficult on your mobile device to leave a rating review. If you're on a phone or an iPad, you can go to your podcast app, click on the search button, search for One Simple Thing with the number 1, Click on the album artwork for the show that pops up, and then there's a ratings and reviews tab on there. It's the easiest way. I don't know why they do it that way, but they make you search for it and then click on the show there. So again, thank you for doing that in advance. Love you guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing the show with others. On the next episode, I'm going to be joined by Julia Loggins, who's a nutritionist and a holistic medical practitioner. She's going to be talking about some things regarding our health that maybe we've overlooked. Areas that we can start looking at rebooting our bodies and our minds to find better health, more vitality, and a happier way of living. So make sure you join in on the next episode of the One Simple Thing podcast. I'm Dave Kirby. Love you guys. Thank you for listening.